You ever get that feeling at work, like the place operates on a logic from another planet? Where the official mission statement says one thing, but the day-to-day reality feels like it's a million miles away? Well, you're not alone. Today, we're going to dive into a framework that actually helps make sense of all that madness. It's all based on something called the Operational Sensemaking Handbook.
And look, it's a feeling so many of us have, right? You see the org chart, you've read the process documents, but what actually happens? Who really has the power? How do decisions really get made? It can all feel like this total mystery. So what's going on here? Why is there this huge gap between how things are supposed to work and how they actually do?
Okay, and this quote right here, it just absolutely nails it. It basically confirms that feeling you have that there are these powerful, unwritten rules that are shaping everything around you. The real operating system of your company, it's not in some dusty policy manual. It's in the hallways, it's in those side conversations, it's in all the things people just sort of learn to do to get by.
So the big question is, how do we even start to read those unwritten rules? Well, that's exactly where this Operational Sensemaking Handbook comes in. And I want you to think of it less like a dry textbook and way more like a practical field guide, a map for navigating the real terrain of your workplace.
And let's be super clear here. The goal isn't to uncover some secret conspiracy or anything like that, no. It's really about giving you a new set of lenses to see through. It's about making all those invisible forces, the real incentives, the hidden power structures, how information actually flows. It's about making them visible. That way, you can navigate them with some purpose, instead of just, constantly bumping into them in the dark.
Okay, so the handbook's most powerful tool, the absolute core idea, is this. Every single institution is actually made of 3 distinct, separate layers. If you can get your head around this concept, they call it the institutional stack, it's pretty much the key to unlocking everything else.
All right, first up, right at the very top of the stack, you've got the business. Now listen, this is absolutely crucial. The business is not the company itself. It's the abstract theory of why the company even exists. So for a coffee shop, the theory isn't just, we sell coffee. It's something deeper, like people will pay for a comfortable third place between home and work to socialize. See? It's the core hypothesis for why customers show up at all.
Okay, so right below that big theory, you have the next layer, the operation. And if the business is the theory, the operation is the concrete model that actually brings that theory to life. So, for our coffee shop, this is all the real-world stuff, the supply chain for the beans, the training program for the baristas, the layout of the store, the cash register system. It's the whole repeatable process for making the coffee and getting it into a customer's hands.
And then finally, wrapping around both of those layers is the organization. Think of this as the legal and human container for the whole thing. For our coffee shop, this is the LLC, it's the employment contracts, the insurance policies. And its main job isn't making coffee. Its main job is to hold all the risk. It's the thing that answers the question, if a customer slips and falls, who gets sued?
So let's just quickly put that all together. You've got the business, which is the theory, the operation, which is the model, and the organization, which is the container. Theory, model, container. They are 3 totally different things with 3 totally different jobs. And honestly, the single most important first step is just learning to see them as separate.
Okay, so if these layers are supposed to be nice and distinct, where does all that confusion we talked about at the start come from? Well, it comes from something the handbook calls layer collapse. This is what happens when the lines between the theory, the model, and the container get all blurry and start to merge into each other. And that's where the dysfunction really begins. Now here's what's so wild about this idea. How incredibly recognizable the symptoms are. Have you ever seen a team that's just obsessed with following a process, even when everyone knows it's not actually creating any value anymore? Or what about a company that seems to spend all its time and energy just defending its own internal structure, instead of, its actual purpose in the world? Yep, that is layer collapse, right there, in action.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem, right? It's the huge gap between the official story and the on-the-ground reality. Your org chart? Sure, it shows you reporting lines, but it tells you absolutely nothing about real influence or how information actually flows or who truly carries the risk for decisions. The real map, the one you actually need to navigate, is that invisible network that exists just under the surface.
Okay, so this is all great, but how do we actually start to see where these breakdowns are happening in our own companies? Well, the handbook gives us a really neat diagnostic tool for this. It's called the Sensemaking Loop. And basically, it's a map of how your organization takes in information from the real world and turns it into action. Now, on the surface, the loop looks pretty simple. You observe something, you interpret what it means, you make a judgment, you take an action, and then you get feedback. Simple enough. But think about what happens in a real company. At every single one of those handoffs, a little bit of distortion can creep in. The sales team observes that numbers are down. A manager interprets that to mean there's a product flaw. An executive then makes a judgment to cut the R&D budget. See how each step gets a little further from the original reality? The whole cycle just gets weaker and weaker. So, where does all of this leave us? What's the big takeaway here? Look, the goal isn't for you to go out and single-handedly fix your entire company. That's not realistic. The real power comes from something much simpler, something you can actually do, just learning to see the system you're in accurately.
Because think about it, once you can clearly distinguish between the business, the operation, and the organization, your whole perspective shifts. You can start to diagnose problems correctly. Instead of getting stuck in an argument about a process, which is just the operation, you can step back and ask, hey, does this process even serve the customer anymore? Which is about the business. You stop fighting these unwinnable battles, and you start to see where your own actions can actually genuinely make a difference.
And really, that's what this is all about. It's not about finding some magic silver bullet to solve everything. It's about gaining the clarity to see the landscape for what it truly is. So, now that you're armed with these new lenses, when you look at your own workplace, the only question left is, where will you choose to act?